I'm an independent business owner. I homeschool my son as well. I think that when we demonstrate self-determination, it backs up what we're saying when we speak about it. I'm originally from South London. I moved to Northwest London. My business is in Northwest London. In May, I set up a think tank called the Solution Room. It goes across the areas of education, economics, politics, and media. And the fact that we don't control these for ourselves. Largely, we've been dependent on others to provide this for us. And being in this building, there's no irony lost on me today that this is where our kidnap and sale was legislated. It may also be the building where they took credit for the end of that. However, after 40 generations of slavery, there was no recompense, there have been no reparations, and there will be no reparations. So now we ask, what is next? What is next will only come from us. So now I'm talking to us, and I'm talking to the brightest and best of us, which is what I've been calling on from the Solution Room, to move forward and play their position. So when we speak about economics, we need to have our own independent economic systems. So credit unions. And this requires very little in the way of permission. So if you look at the way we came here, by and large in the 50s, we came through the Windrush. And we came relying on each other. And necessity is the glue that holds us together. So in 2017, where we all feel very independent, we're very fragmented, based on the fact that we don't see the necessity. But the communities who came here had partners, they had systems and infrastructures, they had codes of conduct. And this is a very short history, and they achieved from that. Because every time somebody's partner was released, they bought a property. Now, when you are outside of a system, you are aware that the only solution is coming from you. I believe this is where we are today. So with no reparations coming forward, without the African Holocaust being recognized by the state that initiated it, we're in the building today, and no irony is lost on me that David Ajay was commissioned a few weeks ago to build the Jewish Holocaust with the 27 blades, which was very easy to point your finger at Germany, not recognizing that this was far longer, far more sustaining, and then with the colonies, the mindsets that were put in place and remain today. So we can play folly to the fact that Jamaica has an independence and all these islands have an independence. They're still owned, they're still governed, and they're still slave colonies, which is why we realize the slave mindset. But I tend not to remove us so much from that, knowing that we are the descendants of 40 generations of slavery. So I asked an important question in the beginning. What's next? So we're not seeking anything from outside, because I said we're in a place of necessity. So now I look at the brightest and best of us, so-called talented 10%, and then we look at the genuinely African Caribbean run organizations in the United Kingdom, and we now want to connect the dots, because this is where solutions happen. This is why the think tank is called the Solution Room, because it's to create the many solutions that are necessary that are going to come from within the brightest and best of us. And we do work across every area. We work in banking, we work in finance, we work in education, we work at the highest levels of media. So I call on those who work at the highest echelons of us to come to the table. And ladies and gentlemen, these professionals have answered my call. We are in the infant stages of setting up a national credit union, because I called on 7 finance professionals. We are creating an African Caribbean educational curriculum to deliver to our children, because when we use our eyes, although the Prime Minister was Christian enough to recognize that we'd been somewhat neglected, it may be in place that we have neglected her with our votes, and now she's recognized us. I don't want to be that cynical. We measure at the bottom of every measurable metric. So if you go to the Office of Statistics, educationally, economically, employment-wise, we are at the bottom. However, there are those at the top with the answers because they've escaped all of those little barriers that were put in front of them. So once you understand this kind of determination, you set systems in place. Leaders are fantastic. Leaders last for a season and they're gone. Leaders can be tarnished. Leaders can be killed. But institutions that are erected last. So now we are in the season of erecting institutions. For this reason, every community will say, you don't need that. We're going to provide you with this. And there'll be a local authority initiative. We're going to give you this. Here's a building. Stop. Don't worry. What do you make? You make 35 grand? We'll give you 50 grand. Then you come to a 5-year lease clause, which is where your lease is reviewed and your lease is raised. And what do? We ejected from the buildings because there are no means. You stopped the momentum of what you were building based on self-determination, and you're back at square one. Well, historically, how many times do you need to wear a trouser with a hole in the pocket to lose your money before you learn you must either sew up the hole or change your trousers? So if there's a man who is behind me collecting the money that I'm dropping, telling me I don't need to fix the hole or change my trousers, and I'm looking at him picking up my money, my eyes tell me a different story. My intellectual capital should inform me based on my experience that I need to sew up the hole or change my trousers. This is where we are today as a community. And the African Caribbean community is vast and varied because a Nigerian experience is very different from a Caribbean experience who came here in the 50s. You had people after the revolution that were educated, that were business people and had a great savvy. So you see a much tighter community. And the church, although I have my views on it, where we inherited this based on slavery, but it's very strong in Nigeria, it is a base where business is done, where people meet, and a great community actually exists. So when we use the term African Caribbean community, make no mistake, there is no community whatsoever. You have a dispersed people who are addressed by government as a community, and it's very easy to point your finger when there is no cohesion and organization. So this is what we lack. We lack organization. Communities are organized because they have institutions. So if I were to say something about Eastern European Jews, I know that the Anti-Defamation League will be on my back by gathering news, dispersed to the news gathering agencies, and before I knew it, I would feel a lot of heat. So there are no African news gathering agencies, because if there was an African news gathering agency, just like when Tony Blair and George Bush cooked up a war which was for oil procurement with no evidence of the initial reason for going to war, which means it was not a legal war, Al Jazeera asked certain questions. So they were answered, and now we have clarity. Because the one thing about a social truth is that it cannot stand up to 360 degrees of scrutiny. Only a universal truth can stand up to 360 degrees of scrutiny. Weapons of mass destruction. Oh, stop. They're not there, sir. Democracy. Up. That's a plant. There doesn't seem to be much voting going on. Free the people. There's more terror. There's more death than there has ever been. Because the terror was never there. The previous leader would have never stood for it. So we now have to look at universal truths, facts. So we can base these on systems, and there are universal systems. And if you look at the traffic system, it isn't here. It's not lilac in South America. It's not pink in Germany. Red means stop, amber means get ready, and green means go. These are a universal set of systems which work for all of us. So any driver that transcends that law, a law being an absolute, makes everybody unsafe. Any pedestrian that transgresses that law makes everybody unsafe. So then you say, we have to come up with a universal set of laws and codes of conduct that benefit us. And when I speak of us, I'm speaking to African Caribbeans because, from my point of view, everybody else is fine. And if they're not, they'll figure it out because we are at the bottom of every measurable metric. And we must grow our position. Look, if you are the head of a family, you are tasked with providing shelter, food, and clothing, and discipline. All of the above. Thank you. I remember mine, possibly which is why I'm here today. There's no more room for us to make excuses. So as we start to validate ourselves, which is when everybody else will give us a value, the value we truly deserve, because as much as we validate ourselves is as much value we deserve from everybody else. So when you see that the value we gain from everybody else is here, in that we are seen here, because our economics are poorly organized, don't be surprised. And don't be angry either, because Europeans aren't our oppressors. We are all fighting over the same commercial ground. We all want the same limited resources. So I'm a businessman. I'm very practical. So when a European gentleman tells me I don't need this, I look at him and I say, you're my competition. And it's fine. Because Mourinho wouldn't go to Pep's room and ask him for advice on how to win the game. This is not how the game is played. Take off your shorts, put on your big boy trousers, and go to bat, competing for the same economic resources, the same educational resources, the hearts and minds, by utilizing your media, because it's all propaganda. Anybody with a sophisticated understanding of news and how it is delivered understands that it's merely propaganda. So have your representation, or you will find yourself exactly where you are, at the bottom of every measurable metric. I come from South London originally, as I said, and I grew up on 2 housing estates until I was 18 years old. So I had a very practical understanding of my position. I knew where I was. I made no mistake. I watched English ladies hold their purses as I walked past. I can wear a £500 suit today, and a young lady who may have £2,000 of credit card debt in her purse, at best, will grab her purse when I walk past. I'm not offended. I'm not concerned, because it tells me to organize, to create our representation. Now, when we change our representation based on how we see each other, and make no mistake that being the descendants of 40 generations of slaves has shaped how we see. We don't see each other by and large through African eyes. We see each other through European eyes. And that is why we have very little value for each other. So what we're learning again today is to see each other through African eyes and have a true value of us based on African eyes. This is why when you see somebody fighting to have a joined African currency based on a gold standard, which is tangible and real. Remember I said a social truth can only stand up to a certain amount of scrutiny, and it's not 360 degrees. So when you look at a fiat currency, which is bankrupt, it relies on nothing. So when a crash comes, hyperinflation may ensue. This cannot happen with a gold-backed standard, which is why the competition will always fight to eliminate the competition. Now, if you are looking to somebody who's always treated you as an underclass for compassion, you are a fool. And you have failed to learn from historic reference point. These are hard things for us to face. They are sometimes painful things for us to say out loud, especially in Parliament. I'm not embarrassed because I have no concern. What I am armed with is my duty as a father. I am a father. So I refuse to hand that legacy of a slave mind to my son. Our minds are comparable to computer operating systems. Now, if your computer operating system is infected with a virus, it will not work for you. It becomes slower, it has less memory. If you do financial transactions on your computer, it is going to affect the financial transactions. It's going to affect every single folder. Well, our minds are absolutely comparable. We were infected with a virus, the first point being our spirituality, and the Christian program was uploaded, and we have had no antivirus applied in 500 years. So if that were your personal PC, you would go out and spend 25 to 45 pounds on an antivirus. You would apply it, and then your computer would work optimally. So our operating system is slowed down by the virus, which was a European virus, and now we need to apply the antivirus, which is going to come from us, which is why I spoke about an African Caribbean educational curriculum. Because when our children are taught great citizenship based on being Africans, which delivers them pride, and then they understand that there is a rites of passage from becoming a boy or a girl to becoming a man, you will have exemplary citizens. Now, you can tell me that it's not important for us to apply citizenship or rites of passage. But were I a Jewish teenager about to become 13, I'd be studying for my bar mitzvah, which delivers me into the community as a man or a woman of substance, because I've taken on a codes of conduct which will work for the community. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. So let's recognize it and let's execute it. Because the time for talking and ignoring white elephants in the room has passed. Our children, who are easy to point our fingers at, are killing each other. So when you see a polarization of post-Cold Wars, we are tribal, gangs have always been there, and this has been in England. If you'd come in England in the 50s, you would have seen teddy boys and rockers fighting, and it's always been. So I acknowledge that this is normal bestial behavior of young men. And it was legislated by providing national service. Now, I'm not suggesting that our young men go into that. I suggest that it should be administered by our community. Otherwise, our young men might find themselves in the middle of an unjust war, which was for oil extraction. So, we are tasked today, 2017, with providing our own solutions. I think that our businesses, being aware of how the 1% exist, should know that they can donate to a charity, which they will get a tax write-off for, so we can purchase commercial buildings and turn them into schools, community centres, and chambers of commerce. Chambers of commerce will financially underpin our communities. The schools will educate our children, and the community centres provide cohesion. So if you have a raft of cultural subjects over 12 months, and the whole of the community is there in our stronghold boroughs, we are not ethnic minorities in Lambeth, we are not ethnic minorities in Southwark, we are not ethnic minorities in Lewisham, we are not ethnic minorities in Croydon, and we are not ethnic minorities in Tottenham. So this is London. So recognising that, if we start to provide this raft of solutions in those boroughs, we'll see very quick results. And our children are who is at stake. who are murdering each other now because things have become trends, things that were polarized in the media. I don't blame the media because it's happening in the streets. They are our children. So now we acknowledge it, and it can be painful to do it publicly, and especially sometimes because we fear embarrassment in front of Europeans. We now have to step aside from those nonsenses and own our problems for ourselves. So if we own our problems for ourselves, we must own the solutions. Nobody is coming. And if you think, based on the Prime Minister's assertions, that she's coming to help you, ask her what her position is on reparations when those blades that David Ajay is the architect of for the Jewish community have been there 25 years. They will have been there 25 years, and you will have received exactly the same reparations then as you have received thus far. I call on our people to grow up. I call on our people to take responsibility for ourselves, not based on anybody else's judgment, viewpoint, understanding, because it's irrelevant. Everybody else, as far as our streets are concerned, is a lamppost. You could be as inebriated as you could get on your worst day, and you will not bump into a lamppost. Make everybody else's opinions about us lamppost. Circumvent them. Don't bump into them. Self-interest, self-preservation, and most importantly, what comes off the back of that should be organization. That is what we are lacking. And that is what will make us the most competitive people on earth. Thank you.